All right, we are at the top of the hour and it is go time for this month's webinar. I'm pretty excited and honestly, I'm excited to see this man on the camera. I don't know if I saw the mustache that way last time I saw him.
It's
Movember.
Awesome.
All right, there you go. Very nice. So let me do a little introduction of what we're going to be talking about today, a little housekeeping, and then we will get into this discussion. But today's webinar is prioritizing mental health while preparing for tax season. Anybody that's seen any of our webinars know that this has been a priority of things we talk about over the last year or so. What we wanted to do this time is to give us a little, hey, we're in tax planning season right now. We're helping people get ready for filing in March and April. But let's also help ourselves get ready for that at this point. Let's get ourselves mentally ready going into tax season so that we're prepared to have the best, healthiest, most refreshing, most productive tax season that we can have. And there's going to be different things that we're going to talk about to help implement. And what I don't want to happen is I don't want you to get overwhelmed with things we're talking about. What I want you to listen to is get one or two things you think you can start to implement, make small changes. And if you start making small changes, you're just going to see things work out better in the long run. So take everything we're saying, find the things that are going to work best for you, what you can do to help yourself come out the most energized you can April 15th that you've ever had before, and have that be a goal. All right, this is, we're calling this a Bridging the Gap Conference Preview Series. We're actually going to talk about Hector's conference as well today, which I'm excited about that. But these are the types of topics we talk about at Bridging the Gap, and so that's why it's the Bridging the Gap Preview Series. As you already see, Hector Garcia is with me here today, and I will let him introduce himself in a minute here. First off, Tri-Merit's the one that puts these on, and so just want to continue to thank Tri-Merit for sponsoring these webinars, which don't have really anything to do with specialty tax other than tax in general. But that just gives you an idea of who Tri-Merit is. Tri-Merit is a specialty tax firm. We help your clients reduce their taxes through different credits and incentives, and allow you to do that advisory work, which I think is a big part of being a healthier accountant, when you have a variety of things to work on and when you feel like you're making an impact. And that's what we try to do with Tri-Merit. A little housekeeping for today's webinar. This is available for CPE. You need to stay logged in for at least 50 minutes, and you have to answer 3 of the 4 polling questions to get credit. Once you do that, we will send the certificates out to the email that you registered with. The slides, I'm pretty sure, are available currently in the CVent app here. In addition, I think they will be emailed to you. And shortly after this presentation, this recording will be on YouTube. And anybody that knows anything about YouTube, Hector Garcia has a very significant YouTube channel out there. So make sure you go look at Hector's YouTube channel as well. And then if you ask any questions, we will try to address those during the webinar. So put those in the Q&A. There we'll know it's a question. The chat, we may not know that's a question. So if you put in the Q&A, we'll take a look there and see if we can get to those questions. I did mention this is a Bridging the Gap preview series. I just officially, I think for the first time, going to announce that Bridging the Gap has been scheduled for July 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of 2025 in Denver. That QR code will get you to btgconference.com where you get more information. Registration is not open yet. It will be open, expected open by December 1st. And so btgconference.com, but that QR code, as long as I did not make a mistake and Hector gave me the thumbs up, QR code is working. Look at me. I know technology. And then I also want to talk about Hector's conference, and I'm going to let him talk about it in a minute, but I just want to let you know, I went to Hector's conference. Hector and Carlos Garcia host a conference called Reframe. I was there last month. It was October, correct? Yes, in Florida. It was an amazing conference. I highly recommend it to everybody. There's going to be a new theme for this year. So Hector, why don't you give us a little background, a little information on Reframe 2025?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So first of all, Randy, thank you for having me, and I look forward to talking about, how can we help our profession have less stress and anxiety during tax season, and actually during the entire year, because
Yes.
I don't think that the stress is only during tax season. I think it accentuates, but I mean, I've been doing this since 2008, and I'm pretty sure many people here have been doing that for even longer. And I think we all know that stress kind of comes and goes in our profession. So this is our third year doing a conference. Last year was called Influential Conversations. The year before, 2023, our first year was called Creative Business Models. And this year is called Pricing with Confidence, because it is going to be a pricing conference. I mean, it's going to be a pricing event, a pricing conference. And it's all about discovering what is the confidence needed to price correctly, price effectively. And the confidence is from two parties. This is the most important thing. And most people focus on telling folks, well, price what you're worth, price what you're worth. Well, yeah, I guess you could do that. But if the other person on the other side, it's a two-part transaction, it's a two-person transaction, if they don't think it's worth it, then it doesn't work. So confidence is the confidence that you have that you priced correctly. And then confidence is the confidence that the customer has that they're giving you the money and they're getting something valuable in exchange. And it's so challenging to give the value up front, because that's not how the transactions work. That for the customer is very difficult to understand or contextualize what they're paying for. So in essence, for you to paint the picture that what you're paying for is valuable and is worth 5, 10 times what people are paying, you have to first believe it. You have to have the confidence to believe that what you're delivering is value. But second, you have to be able to present it in a way that the customer understands that it's valuable. So that's why we talked about communications in the last conference, how to be more influential with your conversations, because that's sort of the precursor to pricing. Is you have to communicate yourself with confidence so that you can price accordingly. So that's kind of the thought that we are giving, and we're still, all the details about how the conference will unravel will be released through the year, but that's our starting point.
Yep. And then that's awesome. And we'll probably talk about pricing as we're talking about stress and anxiety and issues today as well. So that'll tie in nice. The QR code I have here should go to the 24 version of Reframe, but in the top right corner, there's a link to go to the 25 version, which Hector said they're still building out. You can see the website for the 25 conference there at the bottom too, reframe2025.com. So get more information there. My plan is to be there again, and it was a great conference. So, and the cool thing about, I'm going to go on a tangent here, but the cool thing about what Hector and Carlos are doing and what we're doing, we're both going to be in our third year of our conferences now. I feel like we're doing things different. It's not your typical accounting conference, and I think that's what we say, but that applies to both because it is more of these, hey, how do we, in their case, how do we reframe the way we look at this? How do we reframe our mindset? How do we change? How do we get the confidence in pricing correctly? All of that. So I'm excited for this, and I'm excited to be having this discussion with Hector today. I'm not, there's me. I do talking on a bunch of stuff. There's Hector. That QR code goes to Hector's personal website. I didn't ask him if that's what he wanted, but that's what I put up there. So hopefully that's good with you.
That works. That's fine.
And as you can see, the picture, Hector looks a little different in this picture from that one. He's been
It's
on
not a November picture. It's not a November picture.
It's that, but it's also, Hector's been on a very strong workout routine, which he fought a little bit from hearing him talk, but man, he is totally into it now, and it's very cool to see. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit too, and how that has impacted him from a mental and obviously physical standpoint. Did I go backwards? No, I had that in there twice apparently. All right, so we're going to talk about a bunch of different things. I just put some notes in here, things that we could be talking about, things that maybe be affecting what why we get stressed out, why we get anxious, why burnout can come into play. And so I'm going to talk about this just a little bit, and then I'm going to ask Hector a question, and he can obviously jump in anywhere. But recognizing tax season stressors, I mean, there's so many factors that go into that are controllable. One, I think we too often let the clients set the stage of how we're going to work during tax season rather than us. So that's one little thing we need to start doing, is just making sure that we are in charge of the tax season. The clients aren't in charge. And I know a lot of you have done that already, but setting those boundaries is so important. I mentioned at the beginning, but we so often forget about ourselves because we're so focused on clients, and we have to make sure that that becomes a priority. The long hours obviously are important, but we can control the hours more than we think we can. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. But let's just start with the stress in general at tax season, and stress versus anxiety. And I know this is something that you are interested in talking about, Hector. For me, I've always talked about stress and burnout, but I haven't worked anxiety in the things I'm seeing. So let's talk about you wanted to discuss stress versus anxiety, and the difference, and how to identify them, and then tips around that. So you want to jump in with this?
Yeah, sure. But I'll start by, I've been doing a lot of research around the word confidence, and I'm trying to find, what are some synonyms, what are some antonyms. And the specific reason why I've been researching confidence for so long is because when I became a kid, and my kids started becoming 4, 5, 6 years old, where they started to derive their self-confidence based on their ability to do sports, especially my boy. So my boy started to playing soccer, they started to playing baseball, and you started seeing them do some things well and not do things so well. And then I started getting into coaching, and I started realizing that, yeah, I could teach them skills, and sometimes, the mechanics of teaching somebody how to do something can help them become better, and that becoming better builds confidence. But ultimately, my job as a coach to my little league kids, and also as a leader in my firm, and also as a consultant to my clients, the ultimate gift I can give to another human being is self-confidence. I think self-esteem, self-confidence, it's just about the biggest thing. So I've been studying, reading a lot of books about it, and trying to understand, like, how can it be a purveyor of more confidence to everybody around me? I believe that if I can make that my superpower, I can become sort of superhuman, and people are going to want to gravitate around me, because most of us, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for confidence. So in this research about, like, what's the opposite of confidence, or sort of like, what do you feel when you're not confident, or what are the things that give you a lack of self-confidence? It really is stress and anxiety. And stress and anxiety sometimes are used interchangeably, but they're kind of not. So stress is the weight of the present. So stress is how you feel, the pressure of the things you have to do immediately. And anxiety is the fear of something that might happen in the future, right? So we have these two things that kind of play on each other and build upon each other. So if it is possible that the past, like all the things that have been happening up to the moment of today, builds up and creates stress, and that you cannot change, because the past is the past. And there are tips to change that, and we'll go back to that in a second. But generally speaking, the past, of the history of whatever has built up to the moment today that's giving you stress, that it is what it is. But then we have anticipation about something that might or might not happen in the future. That's the anxiety. So if you could at least compartmentalize the fact that there's two separate feelings that you can split in the middle, and then maybe start controlling anxiety a little bit more, you will have a lot more strength to manage the stress, which is that weight of the moment. So I believe that that ultimately, having low confidence or low self-esteem is going to drive you to, number one, make mistakes, and number two, possibly underprice your services, because you're not going to portray that level of confidence. And it's a vicious cycle, because underpricing your services will lead to more work, right? Because you have to make up for it on the revenue side. More work leads to more commitment, and more commitment brings higher levels of reputational risk, right? Because you could make a mistake or not be able to complete something. That higher reputational risk brings about more anxiety about the future, right? Things that might happen or might not happen, which ultimately will be felt as stress in real time, stress on your mind and body, and then vicious cycle. You're stressed out, you have low confidence, you underprice your clients, and it's just all a downward cycle. So I think that if you see it from that perspective, stress and anxiety being the opposite of confidence, and confidence being the ultimate most important thing that you need, then we have to figure out how to increase our self-confidence by pricing our services better, or pricing our services in such a way that we get less work, less commitment, less reputational risk. And it pretty much all sort of stands in that's like sort of where we are in the mess of the past leading up to stress and the fears of the future giving you anxiety. And then the big question is, okay, Hector, fine, I understand the differences, it's kind of an abstract concept. Is there ways to tame it? Can we tame stress? Can we tame anxiety? And I think it's important to understand what motivates people, right? So what motivates people to change are one or two things, are either running towards something positive, so running towards a desired future state, or running away from something negative. So we're running away from risk, we're running away from losing money, we're running away from doing work that we don't want to do, or we're running towards work that we want to do, we're running towards profitability, we're running towards status. So by knowing what motivates you, then you know that the only way you're going to change your current situation, right, the history that leads to stress and the fears of the future that cause anxiety, there's only, essentially, I found that there's only two ways to tame it. So one is to either change your mind, or the other one, change your circumstance. So changing your circumstance could be getting out of the business that gives you stress, right? That could be a way to change your circumstance. Or getting out of taking the clients that give you stress. That could be a way of changing your circumstance. Or getting out of the company that's giving you too much work, that's giving you stress. That could be a change of circumstance. Or you can fire the clients that pay too little and only bring in the clients that pay more. That could be a way of changing your circumstance. So changing your circumstance is probably the hardest one, because it requires like structural and tangible and physical change. But then there's also changing your mind. So by changing your mind, it could be the way you look at things, right? So there's a famous quote by Wayne Dyer that says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So you have to figure out, what are you most likely to do today? What is going to motivate you to change, right? What are you running away from? What are you running towards? And then once you figure that out, then you have to decide, what tool are you going to use? Am I going to change my circumstances or change my mind? And ultimately, the ultimate purpose of this is to remove stress and anxiety, to give you more self-confidence, to then go into an upward cycle for success.
All right. This is why Hector was the perfect person to have on this. He gets so introspective and deep on this. I want to expand on a couple things you said, because the stress and anxiety, I love the way you described that. Stress is the moment, the current circumstance you're in. Anxiety is worrying about the future. And I never really looked at it like that, because unfortunately I haven't talked about anxiety that much. It's more been stress and burnout. But for what I want to do is I want to talk about stress and how stress can actually be also a positive factor for what we're doing, because stress by itself is not necessarily a negative thing. Stress on its own, in the circumstance I'm in today, in the moment I'm in today, can be positive from a standpoint. It creates action. You have to act on something because there's some stress there. And it's simple as, I'm driving the car and a deer runs in front of the car, and stress actually causes me to act and put on the brakes, and I avoid hitting the deer and hurting the animal, hurting the car, all that kind of stuff. That's really acute stress, really short-term stress. That's what we should be striving for. We're all going to have stress. It's always going to happen. There's going to be stress in our lives at one level or another. But what we want to do is control it. And that's what Hector's talking about, how we can control it. The chronic stress, the nonstop stress, where it's just, and this is what tax season can do to us, it's just one, can tax season be monotonous? It can. It doesn't have to be, but it can. And so that monotony of same thing over and over and over, and deadline after deadline after deadline, allowing clients to interrupt what you're doing, and that can just build and build and build to where it's like then the anxiety kicks in, because now I don't have time. I know I got a deadline of March 15th and April 15th, but all these things that are happening, all this acute stress that's going on is just really caused this nonstop anxiety now, because now I think about the future too much and what's going to happen. Am I going to make these deadlines? So all that is a thing that we all go through during tax season, but there's ways to control that. I love what you just said about one of those just being the pricing, because we are so, in general, I'm generalizing, we are so bad at pricing models because of the fear of losing clients. I believe that we don't price things. What you said is pricing correctly and having confidence and showing that the value that you are delivering to your client is going to give you confidence, it's going to give them confidence, and it's going to potentially reduce your workload and reduce your stress. That's one trick. Let me throw a couple tricks in there in addition that I think are great for reducing stress. And I think you alluded to it, but just time management. We're often, as a profession, too reactive. Phone calls, I answer it rather than silent it. I'm looking at my emails, my text, my Teams message, my WhatsApp messages, whatever, constantly. And what we need to do is especially during tax season, is schedule ourselves, that we give ourselves time to concentrate, where there's zero distractions. We have a 3-hour window, let's say, whatever your most energetic time. And this is just something that I want to highlight, because this is a trick that we can start to implement that I think make a big change in our mindset going into tax season. Let's not allow distractions to be part of tax season. I'm going to block everything out. I'm going to close my door. I'm going to lock it. I'm going to turn off my phones. I'm going to close my Outlook. I'm going to close everything. And I know every day from 8 a.m. till 11 a.m., all I'm doing is the 3 most important tasks that day, or the 5 most important tasks that day. And I give myself that time just to work on that. When we avoid distractions, do you know how much more productive we are? Now, there's going to be times where you have to use those. You have to have those distractions. You find out the time of day where you don't have as much energy, and that's where you do those things. That's where you respond to emails. That's where you check your voicemails. That's where you do your billing, whatever it is, where you don't need to have that high energy focus time. But for me, creating focus time, blocking that off in your calendar, if there's any trick you could do, that's one of the biggest, I think, is going into tax season. All right, I went on a rant there, Hector. Before I pass it back to you, I just want to make sure everybody understands. Polling questions are just going to pop up. The first polling question popped up. You have to pay attention. When you see that red dot over in the polls, that I think is the indicator that a poll is up. There was one up already. There will be more coming up. So there'll be 3 more. Just make sure you go to those polls. All right. I went on that. Anything you want to add to that, Hector, before we move on to something else, or other tricks that you have to reduce stress going into tax season?
Yeah, within the whole theme of tips to reduce stress, some stress is internal, some stress is external, right? So some stress is happening, it's like I mentioned, stress is the weight of the present, right?
Yep.
So for example, gravity is a constant stress. Believe it or not, we are all the time being pushed down by gravity. Now, no one is depressed by gravity, right? You're just used to it. And I think that, like gravity, many things that happen in our practice, we just kind of get used to it. It becomes the status quo. Stress, as you mentioned, sometimes is good. How does gravity work to our favor? Well, if you squat up and down, you build muscles on your legs, right? If you push a weight up and down in the gym, you're going to build muscles on your arms. So gravity causes stress that could have a positive outcome if you choose to see it like that. For example, when I first started going to the gym, I dreaded it. So I'm pushing things up and down. For what? What's the purpose? And then now I go there and I enjoy the moment. I change my mindset to enjoy the fact that I have 2 arms and 2 legs and I don't have a broken bone and I can actually do this. So if there's something that you're doing that's giving you stress because maybe at the moment you're not enjoying doing it, but then you think about, well, what's the alternative? Is the alternative like working in a fast food restaurant? Is the alternative, working for a boss that I don't like? Even if the weight of the present is stressful, quote unquote, there are ways you could change your mind and look at it in a way that you can enjoy the moment. So that's one huge thing. It's just completely understanding that certain stresses actually are good for you. Another example of that, and you use the example of, if you're about to hit a deer or something, you get this adrenaline rush that gives you temporary superpowers. I'm a big time procrastinator, and I usually prepare for something an hour before I have to deliver or not. With as much content as I prepare, I prepare 1 hour or two before doing it. I don't like scripts. I like being off the cuff, and I feel that in the moment where I have that stress of the moment of having to perform, I tend to perform my best, because it happens to be that me personally, I overthink things. So if I take 4 hours to prepare, the best version of that was probably the first two, but because I had to go back and tweak it, I ended up watering it down and not delivering maybe, what I was feeling at the moment. So sometimes, depending on your personality, like, I'm not proposing that people should be proactively procrastination, and I know that's a kind of a oxymoron, right? But some people are proactively procrastinators, right? Like they want to procrastinate for a living. Yeah. So, and I happen to be one of them, but I do it because I know that I perform best ad lib. I perform best under pressure. And what's also interesting about that is that could become part of your brand too. So like part of my brand is that. So like when people come talk to me, they know that there's two versions of what I'm going to say, what I thought at the moment. And then 3 hours later, when I say, I'm going to clarify myself, I meant to say this, I meant to say that, right? Where your personality is different. When you are a very methodical person that thinks and overthinks what they're going to say before they say it, the first time you say something, they take it 100% at face value, and it's very difficult to correct yourself. So as long as you're consistent with your approach, right, your approach of the way you show up, you should be able to manage that stress better, because like I said, procrastination and the looming deadline doesn't stress me out, because I know I'm going to end up doing it well. Now, at the same time, the more things you leave to the end, the more likely that you can make a mistake, and there's reputational risk. So that gives me anxiety, which is a whole other ballgame. So I have to pick and choose what things I can procrastinate on and what things I can't, right? If there's anything that has reputational risk for me and my business and my brand, or anything that's potentially can cost my client money, that I prioritize. But then all the other stuff that I don't need to prioritize on, I basically say, you know what? I'll let future Hector deal with it, and I just manage it at the moment. Okay. Yep. Another important stress reducing exercise, and this one's going to be very deep, but you have to think through many layers, because this webinar is not long enough to go through the details, but it is being more intentional around trust building. So again, being more intentional about trust building. Life moves at the speed of trust. Business moves at the speed of trust, right? So almost everything that slows down a process, which is most likely the stuff that builds up and you think about when it comes to deadline and gives you stress and anxiety about the future, it's bottlenecked by trust. So if you take on a client that you don't trust very much, or they don't trust you very much, the document gathering process will be slower, okay? Your clients will give you less of the information because they don't trust you to give you all the information. Or you will cover your butt, right, in a much deeper way. So you're gonna ask 3 layers of substantiation for one, tax position or whatever it is, and it's gonna slow everything down. So if a friend of mine, Phil Jones, the author of Exactly What to Say, he says, and he said this as a reframe, and everybody blew everybody's mind, is you slow down the process to speed up the result. You slow down the process to speed up the result. And he uses the quote from I think it was from the Navy or from the Army or whatever it is, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow is smooth, smoothest path. So what ends up happening is if you slow down the process at the very beginning and you focus on building trust, then everything else is going to move so much faster. I mean, just think about, pre-September 11, how much faster, I remember getting to the airport 25 minutes before the airplane left. And then just after the attacks, you had to be at the airport 4 hours later. And it's gotten better now. It's maybe an hour and a half. But see, life moves at the speed of trust, right? So the more we trust the airport security, or the more the airport security trusts their passengers, the quicker the flights are gonna move, and the quicker we go through security. In accounting, it's the exact same concept. So the more clients you take, the more new clients you take, the more individual separate trust building exercises you have to take. Whereas if you had a little bit less clients with a deeper relationship, that kind of like fine wine, it kind of gets better over time. That trust is going to be layering on top of each other. And then your client will call you, ask you a question. Like a client that you've had for 10 years with the relationship building and context for 10 years, they'll ask you a question. And before the question ends, you already read between the lines, you have the context, you know the answer, and you go straight to, not the question that they ask, the question that they meant to ask, and you go straight to the answer. The client goes, amazing. And that took 5 minutes, right? Whereas a brand new client, one question could take an hour for you to gather context. So you start looking at, for example, trying to figure out whether the time spent is more valuable, whether more time you spend or less time you spend. At the end of the day, the less time you spend in something, that should be more valuable. So people that are still pricing by the hour, they have the concepts upside down, right? They think that the more effort I put, the more I should charge. And this is the big challenge that we have, especially when it comes to repricing our clients. Like, for example, last year I charged $800 for a tax return. Now I'm charging $1,000, and now I'm stressed out that my client's stressed out about the price going up. And your clients could usually come back to you and go, wait a second, you've been doing this for 10 years. Shouldn't it get easier over time? Therefore, the price should be lower. And then usually we respond with stuff like inflation and software costs and or some mumbo jumbo that the customer's like, okay, that didn't answer my question. You answered actually an entirely different question. My question wasn't an economics question. My question was a convenience question. And then your answer should be, hey, the more years that we work together, the more trust that we build, the more space I occupy in my mind to think about you and your business. And the more time that we work together, the deeper the relationship, the more I think about you. Okay, and I think that the quality of the work shows in how quickly I give you answers, how quickly do they return, and how much less errors we have versus you going and starting over somewhere else. So we stress a lot about the price increases, especially over each tax season, but we forget to understand that there's actually value layered in the trust building, not on the reduction of work.
Yeah, and I love that from a couple different standpoints. The trust that we talked about with the confidence earlier, and the changing your, and the two things you said, changing your circumstances and changing your, what was it, the two things you mentioned?
Yeah, you either change your circumstances or change your mind.
Okay, and so mindset's a big part of it. But just to give you an example of showing more confidence, having more confidence, gaining more trust. And this is me changing my circumstances, which I don't think you necessarily have to do. I think you can change your mind as much as anything. But for me, I used to be a generalist. And this is where I was doing everything wrong, trying to help everybody, not being an expert at anything. I think as a generalist, we just have knowledge general, obviously. And so this is one thing that I like telling people, that this is not an overnight thing, but something that'll help you get the confidence in pricing right. Being able to show the value of what you're delivering is becoming an expert, a niche, some kind of niche expert. Now, this is not something you're going to go into this tax season and say, okay, I'm no longer going to help all these clients. I'm only going to help fast food restaurants. It's just not going to happen overnight. But I think something that helps you gain the trust between you and your client, because you can share your knowledge, is becoming an expert in a niche, however you want to define niche, or however you want to say it. Some people say niche, I say niche. And just an example for me, I mean, as a generalist, I got burnt out. I worked too many hours. I was not pricing with confidence. I was terrible at that kind of stuff. The moment I sold that practice and started the specialty practice, which was Trimerit, where we dealt with just credits and incentives, it was amazing how much easier it was to do a bunch of things. Gain trust, because they understand that you know what you're talking about, and that you have that knowledge and you're there on their behalf. I was able to show the value of what I was doing so much stronger than as a generalist, for me. I think you can do it as a generalist, but I think for me, it worked. And so for me, all of that just changed I changed my circumstances, but it also changed my mindset. So it kind of did both. I don't want to tell people to change their circumstance. I mean, sure, maybe that's what you need to do, but I think you can be where you are, what you're doing, and just make some changes. And then one last thing I want to highlight that you said about just a different mindset going in, and rather than looking at this as a stressor or something that's going to cause anxiety. And actually, your brother, Carlos, just put a post on Facebook, I think, similar to this. I try to, and I didn't know what to define it before. I just practice gratitude. I wake up and I'm like, I'm so grateful for this and this thing. And when you just wake up with a positive mindset and you concentrate on the positives and what you're grateful for and what you're looking forward to during the day, it's amazing how you can train your brain to act differently in a situation. Even a stressful or busy tax season, when you just wake up with the positive affirmations of these are the things I'm enjoying, these are the things I'm liking to do, this is what I'm so grateful for, it honestly just changes your outlook on things. And I could go do a whole 2 hours just on this alone, because this has had such a big impact on me. But another little thing that I would recommend going into tax planning season and tax season is just make sure you start your day with listing the things that you're grateful for and you feel positive affirmations about. For me and my family, one of the biggest things that I'm having to do with them right now is talk them off the ledge of being Chicago Bears fans. And so every morning I'm sending out a positive affirmation of what the positive things we can think about of what it is to be a Chicago Bears fan right now. And it's like, just think of how more grateful we're going to be when the Bears win the Super Bowl in a couple of years for all the hard times that we're going through right now. We're going to be so grateful to see that change. And so things like that, I think, are important. And sorry to throw the Bears into a tax webinar, but I think with those things you're saying and the things that you can just small incremental things that you can start to make a change, mindset is so important to that.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. There's so many ways to look at mindset as an angle. I think gratitude is one of them. The other one is accepting your truths. You know, like sometimes one of the things that stress us the most is not accepting, you know, our truths. You know, our truths are where we come from. Our truth is what we're not good at, and sometimes we try to spend so much time hiding that, you know, so much time, you know, hiding our vulnerabilities. And I remember, you know, the vulnerabilities was a big theme in Bridging the Gap of this year, the one that just happened in 2024. And my friend Chris Doe, who spoke at Reframe just now, he talks about using vulnerabilities, like basically attaching a vulnerability to a strength, or using vulnerability as a sign of strength. Okay, so for example, so he did an example on stage, and you know, I think some of the people listening to this live, you know, we're at Reframe. So he talked about there was a video that the way the angle of the video was, my hands look abnormally larger. And there was a lot of joking around the size of my hands. And, you know, I remember commenting to him this couple of years ago, because we were commenting each other about YouTube comments and stuff like that. And he says, look, I could totally see how anyone would be self-conscious about, you know, creating videos or creating content because of the way they look or their voice. They don't like the way their voice sounds, or they don't like their accent or whatever it happens to be. And he says, look, if I was Hector, I would leverage, the fact that he's got big hands or whatever. And I would say something like, create a newsletter called Hector's Handy Tools, or hire us, you will be in good hands, or hands down, we're the best accountants in town. It's like you can actually, instead of trying to hide the vulnerability, you can leverage it and use it as a strength. So, for example, there's something called a two-brand exercise. And I think like last year, Randy, around this time, we were talking about the concept of a two-brand exercise in a similar webinar. And, in my own discovery of what were my my vulnerabilities and my strengths, it turns out that I'm kind of a perfectionist for random things, but for most of my life, I'm just messy. Like I start messy and then I clean this up. So my process always starts just messy, like everything just laying around in the floor, and then I start organizing it and making it look perfect. Like that's how my process works. So my own personal two-brand exercise, we draw the conclusion that I am a messy perfectionist. That's what I am. I'm a messy perfectionist. And when you say that up front, people will go, okay, I know what to expect from this person. This person's going to be all over the place. He's going to be spitting ideas. He's going to be doing this, but he's aiming little by little. So he's starting broad and narrowing it down, and he's going to fine tune it. So if you're self-conscious about having a messy process and you try to hide it by trying to show up front a perfect process, you're just going to draw stress from that, because you're going to draw stress from, number one, from hiding your truth. And you're gonna have stress and anxiety about the person not believing you, or maybe even not being able to set the right expectation. So I think that if you lay out your vulnerabilities up front, and if you're like me, that it starts messy and then fine tunes, you set that expectation up front, and then the customers that like that process will be attracted to you. The coworkers that like that process will be attracted to you. The employer that's attracted to that process will be attracted to you, your mate, etc. Right? So it's a really big problem when you hide your truth and then try to sustain that lie for as long as possible. It will eventually explode. And if you want to think about the peak of stress and confidence, is when you hit your truth for a very long time and it explodes. Now trust is broken. And then, like as I mentioned, you got to be intentional about trust building, and hiding your truth is very much the opposite of that.
Yep, I think embracing who you are and not hiding it from others will keep stress out of your life. The other thing I want to talk about, because you and I talked about this the other day, and this kind of ties into this, is finding out kind of who you are. And I gave you an example of what you like and what you're good at. I'm going to give an example of that I learned from Sean Duncan, but then I want you to expand on this, the whole Ikigai diagram that you were explaining to me the other day. So this conversation that you and I had started with this, like I said, Sean Duncan showed me this way where you can kind of identify, your strengths and your passions and what you like doing, and try to incorporate that more into your tax season, and the things that don't fit into that, you can start to delegate, automate, collaborate, eliminate. And I'm very fortunate. I have been saying this a lot lately. I feel like I live at the intersection of my passion and my skills. So everything I do, I love doing, and you can all be the judge of that, but I think I'm pretty good at the things I'm doing. And so that's the things I love to do and the things I'm good at. So Sean gave me this chart that says, list every task that you work on, every single thing you do. And then to the right of that, put 4 columns: love it, hate it, good at it, bad at it. And when you put a check mark in one of those first 2 and a check mark in one of those second 2, this is something we can do going into tax season, I think, as well, to start to identify the areas that we really like to work on. When you have something that's in the love it and good at it section, that's obviously something you should continue to concentrate on, and you should make that a goal going forward, that's where you're going to spend the majority of your time. If you have something in the column that is you hate it and you're bad at it, I am not a fan of let's work on our shortcomings. Let's work on the things that we are bad at and we hate. There's no reason that I believe to really do that at some level. You could be, I love it, but I'm bad at it. Well, that's something that maybe you need to concentrate. So when you do that and you start to incorporate those love it and good at it into what you're doing in your job during tax season or all year long, again, like Hector said, this isn't just a tax season thing. This is an all year long thing. But when you start to do that, I'll guarantee there's people that you work with right now. If you all did this, they're going to fall into the things that you're bad at and you hate. They can be the opposite. They're going to be good at it and they love it. And when you can identify things like that in an entire firm, you can start to put people in the right roles, the roles that they're passionate about, the roles that they're good at, the things that they enjoy doing. And that's going to just reduce this stress and anxiety levels going into tax season and avoid burnout, in my mind. Again, small steps. You're not going to do all these things overnight, but if we can start to incorporate this finding, helping people we work with and ourselves living at the passion of the intersection of passionate skills, man, this is a great place to be. Okay, that being said, that's just a step. But you went further and you started to explain this whole Ikigai diagram to me and how that's played into what you're doing. So if you can expand on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Like if you have a chance to share the web page, I don't know if you can, of like any Ikigai graphic, I can kind of walk you through it. But while you do that, so it turns out that there's another Hector Garcia out there that wrote a book about Ikigai. The guy, I think the guy's from Spain, but he moved to Japan because he was a fan of comic books or something like that. And then he wrote a book about Ikigai while he was in Japan, and the book has been a bestseller. And because I am a Hector Garcia that publishes their email out there, usually in my YouTube videos, some people assume that by emailing any Hector Garcia, it's actually going to reach the correct Hector Garcia. So I get weekly emails from people that read the book Ikigai and said, your book changed my life, this and that. And I actually went out and I found the author of the book and I found his email and I actually just forward all these emails to him. So it's kind of comical that happened like that. And then after a while, I'm like, what is this Ikigai thing that people keep talking about that changes their lives or whatever? So it turns out that Ikigai is a Japanese concept about finding your purpose. And it's very similar to what Sean was saying, which is basically visualize a multi-circle Venn diagram. So imagine 4 circles crossed in the middle, and each circle contains these 4 elements. One is what you love. It's very similar to what Sean was teaching you. What you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. So what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. At the cross section of just 2 of those, right? So if you have what you love and what you're good at, so if you're somehow doing what you love and what you're good at, not necessarily getting paid for it, or if the world needs it or not. So you're doing something you personally love and you're good at, that's called a passion. In many ways, that passion manifests itself into a hobby or something like that. Then if you grab what you're good at and you mix it with what you can get paid for. So imagine a Venn diagram with both those circles, what you're good at and what you get paid for. Then you get a profession. So most of us are good at doing tax returns and we get paid for them. And I think for the most part, we get paid for pretty handsomely compared to other professions. I mean, if you think about it, like most parents, especially very traditional parents, they kind of what they wish for their kid to become is a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, just because the income potential is higher than other professions, right? Other than being a businessman and having a very successful business and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, profession-wise, when you think of the professions, you think about things that you do with your mind, and engineers, architects, lawyers, accountants. So that's where most of us are at, especially when preparing tax returns or doing accounting work. We're good at it and we can get paid for it. Now let's shift over to a Venn diagram between what you can get paid for and what the world needs. That's called a vocation. So whether you're good at it or not, okay, but if you get paid for it and the world needs it, you do it. That's called a vocation. And then you take the Venn diagram between what the world needs and what you love, and that would be a mission. So if you can get paid for it and you're not necessarily good at it, but you love doing it and the world needs it, that becomes a mission. So inside of this multi-part Venn diagram, there is a spot where all four of these circles meet, right? And in that little vertex, that union of all four in this multi-part Venn diagram is your ikigai, which means your purpose for being. So the reason why this is important, okay, is because I think in many ways a lot of us have multiple single versions of this Venn diagram in our lives. So for example, let's say that you're good at what you do and you get paid for it, that's your profession, and it kind of ends there. And then in a different compartment of your life, you have a mission, right? So let's say you're helping, I don't know, needy children that don't eat in Africa or whatever, right? So so the world needs that, absolutely, and you love doing it, and that's your mission. But these two things are sort of separate. So what the Ikigai concept says is, hey, if you had a chance to live your life by design, redesign your life, forget about how much money you make or could make, forget about your current financial obligations for a second. Let's just live in fantasy land, okay? Just imagine you can build a life by design that meets your Ikigai, and the path to doing that is list what you're good at, list what you love, list what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and try to figure it out that way. So it's not so easy to do this, especially as accountants and mathematicians, but I'll give you just a quick hint. You can go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm searching for my Ikigai. I'm going to give you the three things I love the most, the three things I believe the world needs the most, three things that I think I could get paid for, three things that I'm good at. Can you help me figure out, based on what my Ikigai is, how should I be shaping my career towards? So how should I start? Maybe it's in a niche. It could be like as you mentioned earlier, maybe a niche is not only something that you do to get paid more and gain more confidence and et cetera, et cetera. Maybe the purpose of the niche also is to find your Ikigai or to run towards your Ikigai. So I love that concept. I'm not an expert at it at all. I've just read the book and I've watched a couple of videos on it. But when you start thinking about in those dimensions, it could really change the way you kind of look at the future that you want to build for yourself. And if you find it, let's say you're not living it, but you found it, you know what your Ikigai is, just moving towards that future, whether it's slowly, maybe you're just getting there 1% per year, and maybe it'll take you 100 years to get there. But the journey towards your Ikigai can be a strong enough motivator to then help you maybe not change your circumstances, because we're moving very slowly, or we are changing our circumstances in a very slow pace, but it could totally help you to change your mind and the way you look at things, because you are doing something right now that maybe you're not 100% passionate about, but it is becoming a stepping stone towards your purpose, towards your Ikigai. So I find that people that know what their purpose is, whether they're living it today or not, usually draw so much confidence from knowing what their purpose is, and so much confidence knowing what they're going to use as a guiding principle to make major life decisions, that tends to be the counteractor of stress and anxiety. Whether too much work or too many deadlines are there giving you stress, and not knowing what's going to happen in the future gives you anxiety. Having that counteractive Ikigai, purpose for living, there, you're aware of it, you know what the path is to get towards it, you're working hard towards it, that usually can counterbalance. And usually, like I said, you change your mind, you can change your mind first, and then maybe by changing your mind first, it helps you shape changing your circumstances. Changing your circumstances it's a lot harder. So you got to work on what you can control. If changing your circumstances is something you can't control, change your mind. If changing your mind is too hard right now, but you can change your circumstances so you can create a catalyst and jumping point to change your mind. So that's kind of how I kind of see full circle on this conversation is that. And then finally, most of us are in business, for profit, right? Like most accountants and tax preparers, we're not here to do it for free. We're not charity. And I think of profits in two dimensions. There's two types of profits, right? There's the profit that you use to fuel your company's growth or your personal wealth, and the profit to fuel your company's purpose or your personal purpose. When you think about pricing your services, don't just price high enough to be profitable, price high enough so you can have the leftover cash to do a bit more of that philanthropic and meaningful work. Because I guarantee you that if you have a strong purpose and you have an ikigai, and it is part of that dimension of what the world needs, what you can do there will have much bigger impact on what you're doing right now. So have the confidence to price high enough, not just to have a profitable business, but to have that excess capital you need to have the time to invest in the philanthropic or meaningful work that helps you make the world a better place. So in many ways, don't look at profits as a source of evil. Don't ever let somebody to tell you, hey, you're just money hungry, you're just money grabber. Your firm is just trying to make more money. If your firm doesn't have a purpose, or you don't have a personal purpose, and it's not well known out there, and it's not known that you're investing time and money on this, then people will only see pricing as a money grab. They don't see it as, your investment into the future. And profitability is ultimately becomes a sign of your altruism. And I learned that, I don't even know who I attribute that to, but profits are a sign of your altruism, because most of us don't take that profit and hide it under a mattress. We spend it in our community. We give raises to our employees. We spend it in causes that we care about. We spend it in ourselves so we can focus on changing the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I think about that. And again, it's up to you how you want to take it. It's up to you how you want to interpret that. But you find your purpose and you invest time and money in it. Trust me, everything's gonna come easier. Pricing, self-confidence, de-stressing, all that stuff.
That was a great way to end this webinar, although I'm going to spoil it by adding one thing, that I think, in addition to what you just said, and I just did this week, is write my personal mission statement. I think you have to know, I think going through that process that you just said with the Ikigai and all that, I think it's okay to have a personal mission statement. I think it doesn't have to be static. It can be changing. But for me, it ties into what you just say, the philanthropic part of things. And I think I'm going to say this right, but my mission is to have a positive impact on the people in the accounting profession by inspiring change. And honestly, I feel that you are that as well. And things that you and I do to do that is this. We're not getting paid for this conference. I don't know yours, but my conference doesn't make money. I'll guarantee you that. But we're able to use that. We're able to use that excess, profit, because we can show the value of what we're doing to do I can't say that word, philanthropic things, being the conference and trying to help the profession. So, Hector, this was amazing. It's always great to hear your thoughts on things, and hopefully we gave people some things to think about going into tax season and beyond. We're using tax season because we're about to end it, but this is beyond tax season as well. This is life lessons as well, and things that you can do to just increase your satisfaction level with the profession, with the clients you're working with yourself personally. And if you do that, if you change that mindset, you're going to have a much smoother tax season. Any last thoughts on you? We got 2 minutes here.
Yeah, since we talked about taxes, there's two ways you can choose to see the fact that you have 200 tax returns on your desk. You can say, holy crap, it's so stressful to have 200 tax returns on my desk, or holy crap, 200 people depend on me for the financial future. And if you change your outlook on how you see it, and you mentioned that it's practicing gratitude. you absolutely 100% just perform better, right? Because now you're working with confidence instead of with anxiety and stress.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today. We're right at the top of the hour, seconds away. So again, look for Hector and the conference reframe for 2025 coming out. More information coming out soon. Look for Bridging the Gap, and that information is out currently. Look for our next month's webinar where we'll be talking about another fun topic. Hector, thank you so much for being here today.